Thank you for organizers to invite me. This is a special place for me because I spent here quite a time, especially in the middle of last decade when for 5 or 6 or even 7 years in a row we conducted a series of seminars on European security. We did something what Marcus today discussed a lot. This is a face-to-face, academic diplomacy or communication, and by all means that was very helpful. And I'm very happy to be on the same panel with Mary. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that this place was the place where we met the first time about 10 years ago or 12 years ago. And I'm sure that that the fact that we participate in the same panel is not a coincidence, as well as probably that was not a coincidence that we found ourselves on the same train, which didn't stop in Birmingham. And even, I'm not sure, but maybe there was some kind of a plot to destroy our session, but together with Mary we managed to thwart it, and so we're on time. So my topic is do states need trust, and what do we mean by it? Today trust has been evoked several times, and I hope that my talk will be to some extent a natural way to develop this topic. It was mentioned by all of the previous speakers, by Jack, by Marcus, by Robert, so I think that my choice of the topic was a good one. I think that it is not easy to find a person who would object to a notion that trust is essential for mutually beneficial outcomes. In our life, it is highly valuable thing to have people whom you trust. Distrust is something what everybody tries to avoid. Trust is by all means important for personal relations, for businesses and other collective actions, and for politics as well. I think that trust can be compared to advantage which you gain in financial sphere when actors get rid of transaction costs. In business, trust give you opportunity to act cheaper and faster. This is one of the reasons, by the way, why countries create monetary unions. Trust enables people to rely on another person or entity without, I would call it, safeguarding procedures to ensure one from risks or to minimize those risks. Trust is one of basic topics for behavioral science, for psychology, and even for economic modeling, as for example in the book Trust by Francis Fukuyama. So trust can be both personal and a collective notion. And having said that, I would like to proceed with saying that it is very difficult to pinpoint trust because its meaning or meanings are so ambivalent and ambiguous. Is trust a result of certain actions or a consequence of them? Is trust a constant or a variable? what is the connection between trust and interest? Why so many people or businesses which or who initially trust each other often fall apart? And why there are so many examples in history when states turn from friends to foes or vice versa? So does it make sense to say that certain states trust or should trust each other? Most states are inhabited by millions of people who never meet each other and therefore never get an opportunity to decide if they can trust strangers. The tyranny of geography, i.e. proximity to each other, might have been a reason for generating trust. But many neighboring countries were or are worse enemies, not trustworthy friends. Take, for example, France and Germany in the past, or China and Japan a bit later. The tyranny of history, i.e. sharing the same experience and legacy and identity, might have been such a factor for generating trust. But it seems to me that in real life, long spans of friendly relations or close, even similar identities do not preclude peoples from jettisoning affinities and instead choosing competition or even war with each other. So personal trust, including sympathy, empathy, positive personal chemistry, and so on and so forth, no matter how fragile trust may be, they do exist, and they are, of course, very helpful for a lot of things. However, it seems to me that it is a dubious undertaking to project it on interstate relations, at least as a dominant condition. By the way, like we heard today, personal trust existed even during the Cold War years. For example, Alexey Gromyko felt sympathy to Scheel, the foreign minister of Western Germany, and vice versa. And later on, several years after they signed the Moscow Treaty in 1970, Scheel met Gromyko and he surprised him by saying that his newly born daughter was named Andrea, and they did it in the name of Gromyko. So trust is something what can exist no matter how a certain period of history is difficult for certain states. The secondary importance of sympathy or trust has nothing to do with the idea that good personal relations do not matter. Subjective factor is not less important than the objective one, but it is important to point out that personal trust can be both a strong instrument to advance collective interests, but in the same way it can be quite counterproductive or even destructive if personal sympathy gets the upper hand over collective interests. Of course, in case if both do not coincide and run counter to each other. Still, as a diplomat and a statesman, Alexey Gromyko strongly believed that sympathy should be not confused with state or national interests. if both things coincide, well, good for personal relations. If sympathy or perception that there is sympathy or even trust run counter to state interests, then the former, not the later, should be discounted. And it seems to me that now the situation is more or less the same. Personal face-to-face meetings are truly important. For example, the meeting of Putin and Obama in September in the United Nations was important in order to proceed with certain things. Or their more recent meeting in Antalya, both were important to make things moving. All in all, trust certainly plays a role, but not a leading role in building long-term relationship. But there, besides trust, there should be other ingredients which, together with trust, or even in its absence, provide stable partnership. I will try to list the most important of these ingredients. Interests is the second, or if you prefer, the first pillar of partnership. If interests are not tactical but strategic, then probability is high that relations will be accompanied by trust and affinity. It is difficult to imagine how it may be the other way around, i.e. that trust persists with no interests firmly in place. The third pillar are structures and mechanisms which enable actors who trust each other and have common interests to lock themselves in partnerships. Perhaps this is the most important prerequisite for strategic cooperation, structures and mechanisms. The fourth pillar are common challenges and threats. For example, the First and the Second World Wars were vivid examples how actors under existential threat were made to trust each other. A lot is said about similarities of political systems, or more broadly about values as a solid ground for trust. To some extent this is true, but again to a certain extent. Wars among ancient Greek cities or medieval Italian city-states, or examples from our times as the strategic relation between the United States and Saudi Arabia or other Gulf theocracies, rows between the UK and Spain over Gibraltar, or between the UK and Argentine over Falklands are relevant from my point of view examples. Abolition of death penalty in the Council of Europe's member states is a sacred cow. In the US, death penalty still is quite widespread, but even such a schism in the values persuades few people to assert that Europe and the United States are incompatible in their values. Quite the opposite. Usually they are portrayed value-wise as a single whole. Or another question, do actors who trust each other spy on each other? Most probably not. Well, in a nutshell, trust is important, but usually, as I see it, it is more a consequence, not a prerequisite. there is, well, a set of conditions under which trust can be sustained or can be generated. The broad perception is that there is no trust between Russia as a state, not as a group of people, as a state, and the West as a number of states, and that we should either restore trust or make it, create it to get on friendly footing. I think that this is a delusion. Indeed, it would help if our states trust each other, but before they are able to do that, they should do something more important to sort out their strategic thinking, priority of their long-term interests and mechanisms and institutions. So all those ingredients which can help our countries to lock each other in durable alliances. Thank you.